Business owners of Reddit, what's the most obnoxious reason an employee quit had to be fired over? Not a business owner, but this happened to one of my coworkers. Guy was extremely nerdy, and this is from a self-admitting nerd, and absolutely obsessed with Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally the only things he would ever talk about, and would talk about them for as long as you'd let him. One day I'm on register and I see him being dragged out of the store by cops in handcuffs. Turns out he had been shoplifting tons of playing cards of those above listed games. At least $500 worth, as our store policy was to let an employee get away with it up to that amount before busting them. I think because the charges stick harder or something. See some people talking about theft categories and how they differ from state to state. If it helps anyone, this story happened in New Jersey. Depends on the jurisdiction. IAAL, in my jurisdiction $0 to $199.99 is misdemeanor, $200 to $499.99 is fourth degree, and then $500. $74,999.99 is third degree. Under $500 here, and you get a ticket. Our store owners have started posting their thieves' pictures on FB outing them as the trash they are. Over $500 is felony theft in the US. My wife and I started a small software company 20 years ago. She's the manager and does sales and hours. I do the programming. Anyway, we hired a programmer one time and the first day on the job I spent the whole morning with him going over our development philosophy, how we do source control etc, and then showed him an overview of our applications and how we build them. Along the way he was highly critical, pointing out what he considered flaws and everything. After lunch he goes back in to see my wife. He obviously didn't know we were married, we don't share surname, and at work we keep pretty much to ourselves. He says to my wife, "You know how to fix this company? You need to fire that other guy." We still laugh about that one. What do you need two mechanics for? I really don't. We have guys come in all the time explaining how we can do things better, and generally speaking they overcomplicate things. They come off as smug and thinking they were the first to come up with idea. However, it's more likely we deliberately chose not to go down that path to avoid overcomplexifying the system. Simplicity is always better if you can get away with it. Not an owner, but in a supervisory role. We had a driver that refused to drive at night, claiming it wasn't safe. She was third shift. Her role was driver. This was all that was expected of her. Do the 3 to 7 trips a month that happened between 9 PM and 5 AM. This was after her pleading to be put on third shift. Our director at the time was shady, incompetent, not sure which, so this went on for 6 months longer than it should have. Had a similar experience with a coworker when I was a truck driver in my early 20s. Called our office and said he couldn't complete his route because he couldn't bring himself to drive over a long, suspended bridge because he thought it was going to collapse as soon as he got on it. Drove 2.5 hours to pick him up and found him blocking almost all traffic going over the bridge with a line more than 1 mile long backed up behind him. He screamed in absolute terror when I told him we were going over the bridge, nowhere to turn around anyway, and completing his run. That was a fun 5 hours of him crying, mostly because he knew he was fired at this point, mixed with long periods of uncomfortable silence. I used to do some consulting work and hired a woman to help out. Mostly clerical stuff and whatnot. I flew down to St. Thomas for a meeting and got a call from Sonatrol at 10:30 PM. She had keys to my building but didn't know about the alarm. Basically, she and her boyfriend brought another couple down to have a foursome in one of my offices I had converted to a bedroom where I could crash if I worked late. So I called her. She answered mid-coitus and acted normal, albeit a little tipsy. I talked about a few mundane details I needed to relay to her anyways, and then mentioned to make sure she only was ever at the office between 700 am and 700 PM, since there was a silent alarm that would call me with audio of activities in the building. When I got back in town, her keys were sitting on my desk. Of all the places to have her at, why at the office out of hours? Did she not have a bedroom in her own house? It has a bed, she has keys, and she knew nobody else would be by. What more reason did she need? Could be as simple as being closer to where they met the other couple or having roommates. Not my business but my dad's. He hired predominantly people with criminal records, and literally all they had to do was inspect rental cars for damage as the cars left the lot and keep their noses clean. You could do pretty much anything you wanted on your downtime with no complaints from my dad, as long as he didn't get any complaints from the owners of the car lot. One day one of the supervisors for the car lot I worked for walks out and asks me for my dad's number. Supervisor had caught a guy stealing gas from the property. He even had security camera footage of it happening. Dude was instantly fired. Good on your dad for hiring people who struggle getting jobs. That's exactly why he did it too. One of his best friends of 30 plus years and his brother were both ex-cons and struggled to get jobs. Plus, with the exception of this guy, they were all super reliable and gave him no problems. Everyone with no record, me being probably the only exception, gave him a ton of problems and weren't as reliable. Worked for him well until the business went under many years later. The one that instantly jumps to mind was the woman who was fired day 2 of a call center training course because she wouldn't stop touching herself. Not sure how she got through our screening. This was for a wireless phone company too, not a chat line or anything. Since people requested details, it was really somewhat sad. She was late 30s, early 40s, and I don't think this was an employment scam or anything of the like, and more likely just a mental compulsion or drugs. It was really not that subtle, but done under a shawl scarf thing draped over her lap. Politely and quietly asked to stop by the trainer, then stopped momentarily, but started up again 15 to 20 minutes later. Oblig, I'm not the business owner as well, it was a multinational corp, but really they don't get the best stories anyway. I regret nothing. I like this one because it's so out of left field. People do occasionally see thieves and liars at their jobs. Compulsive masturbators? Not so common. Louis CK has joined the chat. Hired a crew to rehab a house. Guy says he's a painter. Okay, you're in the back bedroom first. Hit it hard, then the other 3 bedrooms. About 3 PM guy says he has to leave early, but will be working at 6 AM to make up. Guy arrives 10 AM. He says he's heading back to British Rail. I ask to touch up. No, he says to continue priming. I commented that he said he was a painter, should have knocked out that room in 1-2 day and been on to the next, at least. He leaves, comes back, tells me I hurt his feelings. Now know this guy is living in a trailer, 3 kids and wife. I explain I can work with slow workers, untrained workers, even people who don't speak my language, but I cannot and will not work with wimps who cannot take direction, because I hurt their feelings. I paid him for 2 full days, even though he only worked 7 and 2 days. All the other crew 5 heard everything. Had great crew, all got full day pay bonuses at end of 2-week project. It was a manager of mine. He always asked for a ton of time off, and I always gave it to him. He put in time request form for 2 days that I blocked because I had something to do that weekend. I told him I'm sorry, but I can't give you those 2 days. It was to go to a wrestling show, which was what he normally asked days off for, not a funeral, wedding, etc. It was a Friday and I walk in, and he had written a note hanging up saying he wasn't going to be coming into work that weekend and wished to continue working for me. Had to cancel my plans and fired the guy. Former retail manager. Had a girl do something similar. Said she wanted to go to Vegas for the weekend, but she didn't ask with enough notice and couldn't find coverage. Plus it was going to be a busy holiday weekend, so I denied it. She ended up calling in sick, but posted all sorts of pictures on social media of her in Vegas. She was surprised when I let her go upon her return. Tool and die shop owner here. One of our machinists would go out for lunch and slam back 3 to 4 beers every day. When I found out, I told him he can't drink beer at lunch. He said it was his time and what he did at lunch was his business, not mine. The next day he came back from lunch smelling like beer. I let him go on the spot. A few years later he showed up in my office asking for his old job back. He said that he was an alcoholic back then and was sorry for his behavior. He was now sober and needed a job. I hired him on the spot and it worked out great for 5 or 6 years. Then he started drinking again and I had to let him go a second time. I have no idea how he is doing now, but I often wonder. He was a great machinist and a nice guy when he was sober. He was a great machinist, must have been to liquid lunch on the regular and have still 10 fingers. Kudos to you for giving him a second chance. Shame that it didn't work out. Not me, but my dad's best friend owns a small bar in the center of my local city. He got offered a high-paying job somewhere else, so got someone else to manage and run his own bar. This guy is hosting a wedding after party thing and realizes has run out of CO2 for his drinks halfway through. Now I don't know a lot about this sort of thing, but I know the logical thing would be to 1 shut down the kegs all night, or 2 try ring up and buy some quickly. Switch to cans bottles and offer some free shots or a discount to make up for it. Simple. This genius of a guy decides, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to connect a fire extinguisher up to the system. To the drinks that people are drinking at a wedding reception party thing. Surprisingly enough, people then complained that the drinks tasted awful and there was a massive backlash. He was then promptly fired when the owner found out. It was a wonder that no one got hurt. I fired a guy because he said he couldn't come to work because it was raining and he had just washed his car the day before. I had an employee call off because it was raining and his car didn't have windshield wipers. That was a brand new excuse for me, so I let him have the day off. Once. You can't drive without them. It's basically a death sentence if you try, and it's actually raining. It's something. Obviously depends on the situation. If it makes you feel any better, I legit had this problem once before, and the boss was trying to call bluff, but there was nothing I could do. I couldn't see with the rain coming down. A friend and I had a version of this problem while on a road trip. His windshield wipers just quit, and we had to get home before the next morning because we had classes. They make Rain-X or something that repels water, but you know, you still have to drive to get it. I had a subcontractor on a job for my company try and convince the client that they should dump me and go with their business and they would undercut me by 10%. Learned this from the client, who asked me to find another person to service our contract. My parents got a quote on some plumbing work they needed once from a chain company, Roto-Rooter, I think, and they quoted some enormous fee in the high thousands. Then, individually, while one is talking to my mother and the other guy is talking to my father on a different area of the property, they each mentioned they run their own side business and could do the work for way less. I still wonder if they knew they were trying to undercut each other as well as trying to undercut their employer. My parents went with someone else. Well, at least they were honest with you. As Ron Swanson once said, I don't wanna paint with a broad brush here, but every single contractor in the world is a miserable, incompetent thief.